in that thumbnail. You don't even know. And we're live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the World of Gray podcast. In a society divided by black and white arguments, we are here to help you explore the world of gray. I have a headache today, and I totally botched that intro. Headaches throw me
I think
off.
you did a fantastic job.
It's all right. So today we're talking about planned obsolescence. What the heck does that even mean, Pete? What am I even talking about when I say planned obsolescence?
Well, we kind of already summed it up as we were going through that all these people need new phones, new computer screens. Things are just not lasting like they used to.
People are saying they can't see Pete, and we told them to turn their phones, and if that doesn't work, I guess they got to buy new phones, and that's really what keeps this machine running. So, Pete, this was your one of your suggestions when we were talking about topics. What inspired you? Because when the topic you suggested wasn't planned obsolescence, you had suggested some things, and I was like, yes, planned obsolescence. That's something I want to talk about for a while. But when you suggested this topic, what is your frustration with this topic, and where was your head at when I
suggested this to you? As my day job is fixing electronics,
right?
I'm just seeing more and more that literally we are throwing out up to average probably 20 to 30 plus items a week going to the scrapyard, and it's just ridiculous. Somebody buys a new TV and it's gone in 3 years.
Right.
Somebody buys a new phone, a chip inside of it is gone, and now you're replacing it.
Right. And then compared to, older equipment, like a good example is tube TVs. Remember these old, big, bulky tube TVs? Yep. And your grandma would have the same TV for like 60 years, and the little thing that would just sit in the kitchen. And I remember we would get TVs like handed down to us from either grandparents or whatever.
Yep.
And the tube TVs would last forever.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes into what we'll talk about in a bit, which is perceived obsolescence. And the only time people would buy new TVs is because they had new features or because they got marketed to them. But it wasn't because something broke down in the old TV. So you could give away the old TV and these things would last forever.
Yep.
And it's just not the way things are now. And with the internet and our ability to research market plans or whatever, we know that this is an actual strategy by corporations and the tech company called planned obsolescence. So when did this all start? Well, when I looked this up, backstory for me, planned obsolescence is one of the things that frustrates me the most from a structural point of view. So I haven't really hidden this bias very often, but I'm a big fan of Peter Joseph, who's a political activist. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he's out to lunch, but a lot of things he says to me make sense. And he likes Florence has joined us. Hello, Florence.
Hello, Florence.
Peter Joseph is a political activist that looks at things from a structural point of view. And if you ever listen to him in an interview, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, the dude never says Like he's so well spoken, it's ridiculous, and a very intelligent man. And he looks at everything from a structural point of view. He talks about planned obsolescence and the inefficiency of that from environmental point of view and a technological point of view, and how much waste is produced from planned obsolescence. And this is, for me, my frustration from a structural point of view of how we should organize ourselves as intelligent beings.
Yep.
And this is where market gets in the way and we get some inefficiencies, and planned obsolescence being one of them. So just to throw an example of planned obsolescence, so we're all kind of on the same page here, this started around 1950, and this is a really interesting story that both me and Pete looked up, because one of the first things when you look up planned obsolescence that popped up, called the light bulb conspiracy, which, by the way, title-wise, is amazing.
I think it's,
because it sounds so ridiculous, but it's so on point with what we're talking about.
It's a light bulb.
And it's weird. Like, you read the whole thing about the cartel?
Yeah.
Like, it's a light bulb cartel. Like, you
got fined after a certain amount of hours.
But like, we all know I joke about computer simulation theory.
Yeah.
I mean, we gotta live in a computer simulation when there's somebody with a light bulb cartel.
Yep.
Like, amazing. And again, why I kind of mock money in markets sometimes because somebody actually built a cartel over light bulbs. But this is something that actually happened in the 1950s, where they created this light bulb cartel so they could control the manufacturing of light bulbs. So in 1881, when Thomas Edison invented the first light bulb, they lasted 1,500 hours. So this is how long the original light bulb in 1881 lasted, was 1,500 hours. And then this became the market.
Welcome, Carrie.
Gary has joined. Oh, see, I gotta.
Sorry, I got you.
Do you want to actually do me a favor? Do you want to find the video on that and then just share that to my Cutler page? So in like the 1900s, that this was the marketable strategy for light bulbs, was to have it last longer and longer. So at one point, long-lasting technology was actually not only the norm, but was a marketing strategy. So by 1924, these light bulbs were being advertised at 2,500 hours. And this was like, Carrie has joined. Oh, Carrie's here. Thank you, Carrie. It's like 2 weeks you haven't been here. She's a World of Grey original. And diehard. So thank you for joining us again. So these light bulbs used to last 2,500 hours, and that was the marketing strategy. So then this cartel of businessmen in Geneva around the same time, so in 1924, Christmas Eve actually is the date, in 1924, this group of men in suits met at a Geneva convention and created the first cartel that
it didn't work. Up? Your phone.
Aren't you supposed to be the technology guy?
Yeah, I am.
They built a cartel to control the manufacturing of light bulbs, and then they mandated all the manufacturers to limit how long light bulbs lasted to be 1,000-hour light bulbs. So because they decided that market-wise it was less efficient for light bulbs to last longer for them to line their pockets, they then made it pretty much illegal, or at least against policy, for light bulbs to last longer than 1,000 hours. And if companies, they would test all the newest light bulbs that came out as they came through the production line. And if companies had too many light bulbs that lasted over 1,000 hours, they would fine the companies for making too good of technology. Deanna has joined us. Hello. So here. Let me do this.
Your phone is new technology that I don't understand.
Yeah. See, you need a new phone so you can understand.
I know. Works. I need a new phone. I'm still on the old style phones.
Sweet Jesus.
It wouldn't even show me.
It's a good
thing. But see, now
it's a good thing we're not paying you.
I hit that button. Thank you.
Because you got stubby fingers.
I know.
That's why.
Mechanics' hands.
So I bring up this light bulb example because this kind of shows the ridiculousness of doing everything for market efficiency opposed to technological efficiency. And this for me is where I tend to get a little frustrated. And we are starting to see this not starting to see it. We've seen this in technology for years and years and years now. So this is for me. And again, like I try to say this podcast is about me learning and me growing, and I don't really understand economics that well. But the biggest pushback for why we need markets is markets are the reason why we see advancements in technology and why we progress as a society, because we make the best products ever, right? This is the thing, is you make the best product ever and people buy the best thing ever because that's how markets work. They're only going to buy the best of something. And that's what competition is. So competition comes in and we're only going to buy the better and better thing. But hold on. If you use that logic, always making the best, most durable product would mean that you would not, I'm assuming, in my opinion, would you not go out of business once everybody has it? Like, so if you make a product that lasts 50 years, okay, so say 5 million people want that product, that goes out. So now what do I do, right?
You've made your money up front, so because all these people have bought it, but
so maybe that's it. Maybe that's the solution. What do people need and want? We make that. It lasts this long, and then what? Maybe I retire, and then somebody else. I don't know what the answer is there. So I guess in this whirlwind of how do we deal with the things not lasting, planned obsolescence.
The biggest thing is that you make that thing, it lasts 50 years. But in that meantime, you've added upgrades to it. So you're buying dongles, you're buying this upgraded thing. So they're still making money off their product, whether it's a computer that you have to buy another disc for, whether it's something, a USB stick or a dongle for your cell phone. Those things are all things that the company still makes money off of.
Yeah. And honestly, this is a surprisingly complex topic. And I think this is where my personal beliefs of how we should organize ourselves as a intelligent society doesn't exactly mesh with current reality, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that we should mandate it so planned obsolescence doesn't exist because everyone should just make the best thing ever. And then, because I don't know what happens there, right? So this is something as me and Pete were going through this, my question would be, if we do that, say with our current tech world, if we make it so that you can't have these little pieces in your computer that die after 2 years, because that's what it is, right? It's always a small piece. You go in, they go, oh, it's not worth replacing because that piece doesn't exist anymore. They're limited. It's going to cost you so much. You might as well just buy a new computer. And that really is the marketing strategy. So that's a real world, like today's example. So my question would be if somehow we got to a point where that was, we all agree that say it's because it's affecting the environment. We mandate it so you can't do that because it's affecting the environment too much. Is that going to stall technological advancements?
I think it is. I think it really would.
Okay.
But a lot of these companies have something in their back pocket. So I always seem to have something.
I would like to know everyone in this community, because I know last week we were explaining the impeachment and we just kind of like steamrolled that conversation. And I talked to my dad after. He said, well, no, he's like, I think you had to jump around like that because it was something that needed to be explained quickly so people didn't lose attention. But today's a little bit of information of just kind of like, hey, if you haven't heard of planned obsolescence, this is what it is. But I want to just get a train of thought going, and I want to see what everybody else thinks. Is this something that we think is necessary in our current reality of capitalism and cyclical consumption? So that means you have to consume to keep the system going. Or is this something we should seriously look at, or should this be a warning sign or whatever, right?
Yeah.
As soon as I started questioning capitalism, 3 people just left. I'm not a communist, I swear.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I would just like to have a little bit more conversation going. I don't know if does this frustrate people? Does nobody care?
Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Emily, for joining us. There's also something called perceived obsolescence, which is not where something mechanically breaks down, but where the newest technology comes out and then we are marketed this new technology to a point where if you don't have the new technology, you're not in with the cool kids.
Well, you're not cool,
right? Yeah, you're not cool.
Obviously, I'm not cool because I couldn't figure out your phone.
Now he's in.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, right there.
Oh.
Look at that handsome face.
Oh.
That's a good handsome face right there. So yeah, I mean, that's the question is, let's go by my personal biases and my belief. I hate all of this. So me and Pete were talking about somebody. This is really where I got into looking at things from like how can we move forward and what does the future look like? And there's a guy named Jacques Fresco, which people have called like a cult leader and stuff, which is amazing. And this is where like the conspiracy world starts to tailspin. Is he has a thing called the Venus Project, which is supposed to be a new sustainable city. So it's a model for a sustainable city. He argues that it's cheaper to just completely rebuild cities slowly, like one by one, than it is to constantly have cities like a city department try to fix all these little things that are breaking, right? It's just cheaper to use the newest technology, rebuild society. It's not, instead of blocks, it's done as this like outward circular city with bullet trains connecting cities to city. Like it looks absolutely brilliant, but within this concept, he talks about planned obsolescence and slowly getting away from this needing to have the newest gadget constantly come out so that you buy things and have things just last so long that not everyone needs to buy the newest thing all the time. And then we start getting into like shared goods and blah, blah, like car sharing is one of these things. And we're going to talk about this later too, because this is something that Jacques Fresco has passed away at like 91 or something like that a couple years ago or a year ago. But he's been talking about this stuff since like the 70s. But now we can't. So then on the other side, and I know I'm jumping around a bit, but on the other side of this, we talk about, okay, well, if we didn't have planned obsolescence and people don't need to buy new things, is there not going to be a will to create new things? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. That is a really tough question to answer because yes,
we're not that bright.
No, some of these companies definitely have something in their back pocket, and some of these other companies have nothing in their back pocket. And yeah, like you said, if someone can make something last 50 years and it's only little upgrades, how much money are they actually making?
Yeah, and how much of competition does that kill? Because we have all these different tech companies trying to compete with each other for the newest thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's still going to be some competition because they would want to invent. But okay, so on the other end of that, though, because the market. Sorry if this is confusing because this is literally just like me thinking out loud. But because market efficiency wants us to always create new things to sell, are we going to create more little changes in technology to then slowly squeak them out and squeeze the most amount of juice we can get out of it, right? Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
So it's like, instead of like, oh, we could have this computer go from like A to Q, we're going to have it go A, B, C, D, E, and we're just going to, so like, they might just be sitting on the newest technology. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if we didn't have planned obsolescence, would it then be like, okay, well, we created this thing that's going to last X amount of time. Let's move on to the newer, bigger technology. And would we actually jump faster doing it that way? And then we can also get into the argument of open source, right? So because of markets, we have, I think the question is, will we lose our motivation? Ooh, that's a good point.
Wow.
Okay, so I think that's a whole other podcast. So I guess that question is, if we get to a point, correct me if I'm wrong with where you're going here. If things lasted a lot longer and we got to a point where we all had all these things that we needed, and then maybe technology went to let me go to one thing first, because I really like what this is my mom actually. I'm totally hyping up my parents here. But this is a good point. I guess this question, and we'll put a pin in it, we'll go back, is if people don't need to work as much, or if technology was great, would people lose motivation to do anything if we didn't always have these things to strive for, right? The newest and baddest thing. And that's definitely a reality. So for me, from a structural point of view, I've argued for a long time that, and I'm trying to write a script right now because I have a video in mind that I want to do, but humans are susceptible to animalistic behaviors, right? Because we're animals, and we want, it's easy to manipulate us, right? So we're greedy because we've been told we need all these things, but we also have the gift of shared intelligence. And communication, right? Which not a lot of animals have that ability to share its intellect. And I think what stifled us is that we don't do that, right? We don't share. We have intellectual property, which a lot of companies now are starting to understand the benefit of open source. So for me, instead of having, I always think of collective effort, right? Like collective energy. And the organization of that is a fucking clusterfuck. Like, how do we collect? And that's like the socialist, communist, capitalist argument that's been going on for centuries, is how do we organize ourselves as we do need competition. Yeah. Okay. So we're on the same page here. So the argument is we do need competition. I don't know if I agree 100% with that, but that is an amazing point and argument, and it's really hard to dispute. So the argument is, do we need competition to actually progress as a society? So if we just kind of ignore that for a second, and that's a very real argument. I don't want to like skip over it and say that it's not valid, because it is. But in a perfect world, if we could open source our collective efforts, what I feel let's just say we could do that. Okay. Well, what would our priorities be? Okay. So say we can all go, okay, well, whatever we need, we're going to do to solve this problem with technology. Well, we should start with food. How do we efficiently produce enough food for the entire planet? That should be number one, right? Then housing. How do we make? And so just to be clear, like this isn't something that's never been discussed and that is necessarily impossible. Vertical farms has been discussed a lot. So really high vertical farms where Peter Joseph will argue that if you line the coast of California, you could feed the entire state, right? And if you just built off that with renewable energy, eventually you could feed the entire world. And then housing would be the next one. There's arguments that 3D printing could get to a point where you can literally print houses, right? So my thing
it's almost at that point now.
Right. So if we take that concept of where technology could be for technology to solve problems instead of like laws and policies or whatever, and then factor in how planned obsolescence keeps us in the cyclical consumption of creating things that we don't necessarily need. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right. So, and I'm not saying we don't need phones, like all this stuff's important, but even just little things that we create to break down toys or TVs or whatever.
The thing is as a child, did you need a cell phone?
No.
And so
who needs it? Yeah. Not everyone needs everything. Right. And I 100% agree with that. So let's say we get rid of planned obsolescence, we create things to last. We go, okay, well, we figured out how to make this product. We got that. Everyone is utilizing that to where they need it. We can make little changes as we go, but let's move on to the next thing. So my question would be, you open source all the information, so everyone has access to everything anyone's ever thought of or created. We all build on that. We start solving all these little problems, and we start with survival. So everything we need for survival becomes very quick, easy, and efficient. Then we move on to the next thing. So my question would be, if we weren't so stuck in all this consumerism and this made up imaginary thing that is markets and money, which really it is just information and bits and ones and zeros, which organizes us. I'm not saying that that's not what we need at this current time. It's what keeps people, like my mom's saying, so it keeps us motivated. And but I think it also, there's some negatives there, and it also keeps us scared and in fear, because price of like I went to the grocery store yesterday. I got like 2.5 bags of groceries. It cost me $135. So I'm trying to eat healthy, right? Right. So there's all these little things when it comes to the manipulation of everyone just having to try to grab a dollar, and not. Because then the other argument there is, what does that even mean when we're talking about like the dollar? Well, it's supposed to be our contribution to society, but are we all really contributing to what I'm talking about is like actually solving problems? Well, not necessarily. Some of us are just, selling random shit that nobody is ever going to use. It's not a bad thing. We need that. And I don't know. I think I'm getting a little bit off topic of planned obsolescence.
No, you're really not, because you're going.
I think it's all linked. I think it
does.
Yeah.
And so this planned obsolescence is a lot more than you would think, because it puts a whole bunch of things into perspective, and it also ties one thing into another thing into another thing.
So my mom says, I like the idea of shared intelligence, but we're in a society where we've been forced to compete in a corporate world, and the people who win or achieve the highest goals get the advancements. Yeah, and that's a really real reality, is where but it also comes into like we're playing a game, right? You got to play the games of the markets, and also there's a lot of stories of people coming up with technologies that are too efficient and just like being murdered. Like there's that story of the guy that created the car that runs off water, and then he died of they say he died of natural causes, but on the day of his funeral, the family went home and his house was ransacked and all of his research was stolen. So I think there's a real marketable advantage to stifling technology in a lot of ways. And then there's also an advantage to having things break down, have this cyclical consumption. So for me, I've always said the two things that frustrate me the most from a structural point of view is planned obsolescence and lobbyists. And I'm not going to talk about lobbyists today because it drives me crazy. But I think researching this topic made me realize that I don't understand this as much as not that I thought I understood it, but I was more outraged than I think was necessary. I still don't think planned obsolescence is a good idea. I think that it was made as a answer to a problem in the market, in the economy. But then there's also we're also a culture, and we want to advance, and we want new things. I think maybe that's preyed upon a little bit with perceived obsolescence, which is another interesting concept, right? And I mean, this is huge. There's a really interesting commercial. There's a mom and daughter texting, for a Galaxy commercial. It's like, did you get the new update? Yeah, I did, because it's like, if you don't, you're not
cool. Yeah.
But then these parts break down. Like, I had a phone, I upgraded my plan and got a new phone, and then I lost it, and so I went and tried to use my old iPhones, and they just don't work anymore. And they're not even that old. It's just they break down, and so I guess the question is, can we make technology to last, or is there a mix? Is there planned obsolescence? But like, maybe these phones, maybe there's other things in here that don't work, right? I don't know. Maybe I feel like this is a bigger issue than some people do. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that
it hurts my head.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you like on my side of things, especially fixing electronics
see it all
now.
the time, right?
I see this every single day, and it's not necessarily the same thing that breaks.
Mhm.
The most common thing, obviously, is the screen.
Right.
Somebody drops their phone, they need to replace the screen. It's not always the innards that go, but then you get to an ISO or whatever system, and you can only upgrade to 10.22.
Right.
Now you have to get a new
which
phone.
is a different form of planned obsolescence. So instead of a physical part breaking, the software no longer gets upgraded, which we're going through with the wire right now with our software for memberships. That being said, that software lasted like almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But
I was going to ask you about, like, as far as your gym goes, as far as upgrading equipment, what would you call that then?
So that's interesting. So, I mean, a gym, there's a lot more solid parts, right?
Yes.
And it's very mechanical for the most part. But it would be interesting to see how that works with things like treadmills and ellipticals, because I actually don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
To see if there's any parts in there that break down. But the other interesting part of this is how, like, these pieces are so expensive that it's not even worth fixing.
No, a chipboard goes in one of your ellipticals, it's probably not worth fixing.
Right.
Unless it's a relay that's a $20 part.
So Peter Joseph also talks about this because he's very solution based, and he's saying, so he's a filmmaker by trade, right?
Yeah.
Very intelligent man, but he's a filmmaker by trade. And he's saying that's one of the most frustrating parts about being a filmmaker is he has a camera. He wants to go buy a new part for his camera. There's 5 million parts in this store, but there's only like 3 that work for his camera.
Yep.
Right. So what he argues is, if you got into this like very utopian, like, I'm going to say the word utopia because that's what everyone's going to say when I describe this.
Yeah.
Venus project type thing. And you had technology that lasts years and years and years. It's like a shell technology. So you have whatever these main parts are that last forever as the shell, and then just the pieces that would need to be replaced, right, by their natural life course, would be easily removable and easy to replace, instead of going, oh, this one piece broke. Well, I can't really get in there, or they don't make it like that anymore, and blah, blah, blah. So I got to buy a whole new thing. So you would just buy different pieces, and instead of having 75 different brands, you have the shell, which is the same whatever, and then you can have different parts. But I mean, again, that kind of goes against markets because you don't have brands, you don't have competition like my mom's talking about. So that's not really a market efficient. That's not really efficient market wise, but to me, it's more intelligent, right? From like not what makes sense, but what is the most intelligent solution for this to move on? I guess the other argument we can make about this, or what we can talk about this, is what is the environmental impact of planned obsolescence? It would be really interesting to know, and I don't know if there's any way you can look this up, but it would be interesting to know that since the 1950s, how much more waste we've produced. Now, this would be skewed even if you did find this, because population grows, technology just gets better, and in a capitalistic world, we're also going to tell people they need more stuff because it's cyclical consumption and we have to keep consuming. But it would be interesting to know just how much more waste we've produced with planned obsolescence? Again, I would like to hear from the community. Today is a lot different. This is more of a philosophical debate about how we should structure ourselves as a society, and should we continue on with this cyclical consumption? And I think for me, I kind of live in a world I don't agree with. And I think that's a big reason why I started this podcast. I think it's a reason why I like to hear other people's point of views, because I could be wrong about all this and I might just be being too cynical.
Yeah.
But it just, for me, it's frustrating and it doesn't make sense. And I just feel like,
okay, as far as electronics go, just electronics, 20 to 50 million metric tons of e-waste.
Since 1950?
Yes.
Because of planned obsolescence, or just that's the total?
Just that's the total.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess a big thing for me, because I try to look at things as in a structural way, I get into a lot of people that argue, well, I mean, you should be thankful for the world you live in, and it is. And this is something that I think gets misconstrued from the other side of the argument. So I guess more towards my side of the argument is everyone is saying like how terrible all this stuff is and the world is so bad, and the world is getting safer every day. It's getting easier. Terrible poverty, extreme poverty is reduced over time. That was scary. I don't know what that was.
Sorry.
Who was that? But yeah, so I don't know. For me, I always try to look at things from the point of view as if an intelligent species were to hover over the planet and just watch us and see what we're doing, what would they think? And I feel like, so you're this little piece of, or this ship that comes over you, this intelligent species, you just want to kind of see what humans are doing. So they have this world on this planet with all these resources that has everything they need to survive. And then they just extract way more resources than they need. They pollute their home. Like if you had somebody come into your house and they just kept bringing crap into your house and like food and wrappers, and they were just tossing it all over the place, and you're like, you gonna clean that up? And they're like, don't worry about it, we got time. You would kick that person out of your fucking house and be like, stop leaving trash everywhere, right?
Yep.
So I think to bring it back to the point of this conversation, when we're literally creating a strategy so that we can consume more things than we actually need, because that is the only way our system can survive, to me, that is insane.
Yep.
And hey, I drive an SUV that is not a hybrid. I am part of the problem. I'm not saying that
I drive a 1998 vehicle. It's probably the war environment, period.
Yeah, I was selfish. I picked that for wrestling road trips. And so if you want to use an ad hominem and be like, this guy doesn't care about the environment either, like people do with Greta, right? Oh, well, she has a boat, so I don't know. You know, people say like, or like Bernie Sanders. Well, if he cares so much about climate change, why is he flying? Because driving to city to city to city on a presidential campaign is really fucking impossible. Because he wants to win an election. But if he was promoting things like bullet trains and new technology that would get you there just as fast, that doesn't involve fossil fuels, okay, well, now I understand. So, I mean, I'm talking about change that I think should happen, but I'm driving an SUV because that's the fucking technology for what I need it for, right? I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying I couldn't be a better person and not use that SUV. But if we're not going to make structural change, it's the same thing with saying, like I'm saying, don't drive an SUV if you care about climate change. Well, the top 100 companies in the world produce like 90% of emissions or 80% of emissions. So us doing something about it is completely fucking irrelevant. So I think people not taking the structural view of things sometimes starts to really muddy the waters. But it's also, to be fair, the world we live in, and these are the nuances we need to discuss. So Val has a comment here. I think it's hard for some products to be made to last. Technology is changing so fast that it is hard to keep something for long-term use. But I don't agree with some technology that is out there. I don't need a computer built into my fridge. The fridge is essentially, that's a good point. To that point, then, if technology is always changing rapidly, shouldn't we then not have planned obsolescence? Like, so if planned obsolescence didn't exist and we just went off perceived, so would it be just as bad. I think it would be better if we just want a new thing because it is more efficient and it does more things for what we need. Okay, then I don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
I can hand this in. It can be recycled because we're not pumping it through so fast that we can't keep up to the recycling. That can be recycled. I take the new technology just because it's better. But to have something break down and not work when somebody would want to keep it, that to me is the problem.
Yep.
So there's a new phone that comes out, but I go, well, I like this phone, so I'm good with it. This phone does everything I need. I don't care about the marketing aspect of it. I just want to use the phone I have because I don't want to pay for a new one. I can't afford it. It works. But then a little chip in it breaks down and then I'm forced to buy one. So not only do I have to buy something that I don't want, not only am I contributing to the wasteful world that we live in, even if I don't want to contribute to the wasteful world I live in, I then have to buy a new fucking phone and maybe I can't afford a new phone. Okay, so then I get a free phone when I upgrade my contract. So now I have to sign a new contract, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, this is where the market aspect starts to frustrate me. I think we should, and hey, I'm 100% with Val. I think we should we should hold companies accountable. And I think this shit's all connected.
It
need
is.
to get money out of politics. And this is why lobbying is so frustrating for me, because it's the lobbyists that stall us from advancements in policy, right? So Val said we should keep companies accountable. Why don't we keep companies accountable? Why are companies allowed to do all this shady shit, make shitty products that are wasteful? Because we have people in power that are lobbyists that are, we have to keep the economy going, and they lobby and they put money in, and then we have marketable campaigns. Like this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about how we say, the market is like the natural way we decide like what's good and what's bad and what people need, right? Like if it's a good product, people will get it and they'll find it. Yeah. Okay. Well, if the market only makes us produce the things we need, then how come marketing is a $1 billion+ a year industry? Like we are constantly fed we're constantly told that we need shit that we don't need. It's a $1 billion industry. Companies spend way more on marketing than they do on the actual product itself. So, I mean, there's a lot of these little talking points that we're told to why we need markets and why we need that. And I'm not saying there aren't real arguments to why we need markets. There could be some, we may not be at the social evolution where we can do things collectively without markets. I agree with that. I don't think we're there. But to say, the market just like the invisible Adam Smith's invisible hand, right? The market sorts itself out because people are always going to get what they need because competition. Dave Rubin is a guy who used to be very left and then it became a right-wing conservative commentator because it made more money. And he always does this thing where he's a libertarian and he's trying to say, you don't need government for this, and this. And then he goes, and then and then competition kicks in. He just does this. And then competition kicks in. Like when you have competition, everything just sorts it fucking self out. But that's not true. We're marketed that we need shit that we don't need. So you could have an inferior product, but if you have a way better marketing team, I'm gonna buy your shit over something that hasn't been pushed down my throat.
Welcome, Mike.
Mike has joined. I went on a bit of a rant there. I apologize.
Yeah, I do have to say, Carrie's comment there definitely makes a whole lot of sense, and it's the hallmark, the way that she says that, the Hallmark holidays.
That's a great way to word it. Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, this is a frustration. This is another frustration for me. I'm a very positive person. I was joking with a staff member yesterday that the Y is our safety bubble because we were talking about the Iran conflict that's going on with Trump. And definitely like the Y is my little safety bubble. But there's a lot of shit that frustrates me. And when we talk about the manipulation of consumerism, holidays are the biggest one. Like every fucking month there's a holiday. Yep. And this Christmas, and I love Christmas for hanging out with family. I like giving gifts too. Like I'm not saying I'm not that I'm against giving gifts, but the pressure of having to spend so much money at a certain period of time where we can't, like me and Jen have not gotten married yet because we can't afford it, because with the house and with all these things that come up when you have to live in a society with social norms, it's really hard to not only survive but to move forward and do things like a wedding, which I understand first world problems. Like I can't afford to get married. I'm very grateful for what I have. And that's the other argument that comes in. Oh, well, now you're not grateful for the world you live in. I think all these little, not jazz, but all these little arguments that people take away from the structural view of all of it, of what actually makes sense for intellectually, right?
Yes.
And when we talk about progressing technology, I think even though we may stifle technology because we let it out so slow, we have intellectual property, technology is still evolving regardless. It's never going to stop.
No.
Right? Unless we kill ourselves. But technology is always, regardless of all these old ass men politicians, not necessarily just conservatives. I meant that in like the classical sense of like conserving the status quo. I don't mean right wing compared to left wing.
Yep.
But people that don't want things to change, it's still going to. And you have companies like Tesla. Elon Musk is now embracing open source technology, right?
Yep.
Because he understands that when you open it up and let everyone collaborate on technology, it grows and evolves a lot faster.
Welcome,
and
Rob.
I think that that's the solution to things like world hunger and just basic survival. And the answer is not economically. It's how do we get technology to a point so that it can solve these problems, and what is stopping it and what is stifling it. And a lot of ways markets stifle and stop it. One thing that always got me when I was young, very, very young, we learned about the Great Depression. When the Great Depression happened in 1929 or in the 1920s?
Yeah, 31 or 29, somewhere around there. Yeah.
29, I think, was when the banks had those marginal stocks and cash into the marginal stocks and tanked the economy. But when that happened, materialistically, what changed?
Nothing.
I'll wait. Right? So the materials in the world, the factories that already existed, what changed? Right? The factories that could have produced the food for all these people that were starving, the farms that existed, the agriculture, what changed? What physically changed on the planet in America? Absolutely fucking nothing.
Yep.
And this is something that I was listening to an Alan Watts video that was money. It's called Money Explained. I don't think that's what he would call the video, but that's what it's called. Alan Watts Money Explained. And he talks about this illusion of money. And so all these people starved to death because we were at this economic halt because some assholes fucked around with the algorithms of the stock market and tanked the economy. And yes, I understand it's more complicated than that, and there's a lot of other things. But you look at the housing crisis, same shit. These guys, they gambled with some imaginary fucking algorithms of debt trading. It was debt trading. I was going to say but it wasn't. It was debt trading. It was debt trading, mortgages. It was debt trading, and it was adding third-party insurances. They created this imaginary world where they could just siphon money.
Love, Mike.
They could siphon money from the money pool, and we all got stuck with the check. And I say Canada not as bad, but the States hard. They got hit hard. So a lot of times our ability to survive just on a very basic level and to have better mental health and just to have the things we need get stifled because of imaginary lines and illusions. I mean, and then it goes back to, we can definitely get into the argument of what does that mean? Like, do we get to a point where people don't have to work? Well, maybe, but if people don't have to work, then they lose motivation. Okay, I understand that. That's something we could definitely sink our teeth into.
Mike, don't worry. I'm not going to get too comfortable in this chair. It's not very comfortable.
Yeah, he already blew a spot. So if you watch through the video, Mike, you'll see him blow a spot.
Yeah,
that's okay. So I think for me, because I really try to look at this collectively, and I really watch how much of my own opinion I spew out there, because I think that I need more time to delve into my own overall ideology and philosophy, because I think there's a lot of complications in where I think we need to be. But I don't think having an end goal or an end of I don't think us thinking, hey, where should we be? And then how do we get there is a bad thing. I think, yeah, it's complicated and it's nuanced, but imagine that we lived in a world where people didn't have to work, but they wanted to work. Mind fucking blown.
Yeah, totally, because
who the fuck wants to work? Right? How many people? I want to work. I like to work.
I
like
love
to
to entertain. I do.
Do I necessarily want to have to go to work because I have to have this schedule? Because if I don't, right? Do I wish I had a little bit more flexibility in my life? Sure, that's true. I'm one of the lucky ones. I actually enjoy going to work. Can you quickly Google if there's any statistics of how many people actually hate their job? And you can go just America or Canada or North America, whatever you want. But could you imagine if we didn't have to work, we wanted to work? And you know what? Just saying that, I'm going to get a ton of credit. Maybe not on this page, but if you know, in the future when we get a broader audience, I would probably just get ridiculed with comments, right? Like, what a hippy dippy socialist bullshit. But isn't that overall what we should be striving for in a society? Shouldn't it be
85%?
85% of people in America?
Yeah, in America.
In America, hate their fucking jobs. Okay, so what negative externalities is that going to cause? It's going to cause depression. It's
87% in Canada.
Right. It's going to cause depression, suicide, anxiety. I get anxiety going to my work enough just because it's a big responsibility. But if I hated my job on top of that, oh man. And I think if we don't look at health, mental health, physical health as what am I trying to say? I'm not like the reason for like how we run our society, right? So the baseline of what we're going for. There's a word I'm looking for.
Here we go. Round 2 of Colin looking for a word.
Last week was ad hominem, and that's when you attack somebody's character to win an argument. It's a dodge. Ad hominem was the word I was looking for. Barometer, maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
Barometer.
But okay, so as a society, what is the point? What is the goal? How do we measure? I guess that's as close as I'm going to get. How do we measure the health of a society? Well, it should be our physical health, our mental health. How do we actually measure it now, especially in the States? GDP.
Yep.
The fuck does that even measure? And that's what it gives politicians and people in power some number to point to go, look how great we're doing. Trump constantly talks about how good the stock market's doing, how good GDP is doing. Okay, well, look at wage inequality. At the same time he's bragging about GDP, wage inequality is getting wider, and wider. And for the first time ever in the United States, life expectancy is going down.
Mm-hmm.
It's going down. We're in 2020. We have all this fucking technology and life expectancy is going down. And a big part of that is suicide and depression.
It is.
And this is the shit we don't talk about. So we need this. We need the markets, and we need cyclical consumption. We need planned obsolescence. We need it to keep the system going. But nobody ever stops to think maybe the system isn't fucking working.
Exactly.
And we're all susceptible to propaganda and Twitter and all this shit, and it's all really confusing, and we're all just a bunch of people living in a society divided by black and white arguments. But we are here to help you all explore the world of gray. Thank you all for joining me on this very unorganized rant. I am Kelowna's Cougar Meat Kid, Colin Cutler.
And I am Handsome Pete.
Peace. Love. I usually have Chisholm to do the love part.
So sorry.